Hello, everyone. So we are now into Halloween week, which means we are deep into the fall semester. We've only got about another month left, and then we're going to be done. So we're going to finish up with essays and short stories by the rest of our writers. So we're done with poetry. Yeats was the last of the great British poets, so we won't be reading any more poetry for the rest of the semester, but we will read essays and short stories, and we're going to start this week with a very important excerpt from a book by a very important writer named Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf was one of the early feminists. She was, when she wrote this book that we're going to read from called A Room of One's Own, she basically, her premise of this book is that women need to become writers and women need to speak out. Women have been silent for way too long. And so we open this with an excerpt from the book where she's looking around at the at a collection of books and finds that even though William Shakespeare and writers of his ilk wrote about these great heroic women, he based one play on Cleopatra, who was the queen of Egypt, obviously. He had Portia. He had many other grand heroic women that were strong and intelligent and made an impact and made the world better. And yet she can't find anything about the women that actually lived at that time, except for some excerpts about how wife beating was legal, right? So imagine women, you don't have the protections that you have now, that your husband or your father would be allowed to beat you and nobody would say a word about it as long as it wasn't severe, right? So that's where the rule of thumb comes in. The rule of thumb was based on an old law that said that a man could beat his wife as long as the object was no bigger around than his thumb was. So she's going to say, wow, there were no women writers back during Shakespeare's time or before. There were no, we don't know anything about the women except that they were wives and mothers and daughters. And that's about it. That's all a woman could do. So she marvels at that. And then she's going to create this hypothetical story. All right. She's going to say, what if Shakespeare had this sister named Judith? Which, by the way, was based on one of his daughter's names, not his sister. So he's going to say, what if Shakespeare had this daughter named Judith who was just as smart as he was and who was just as good a writer as he was and had the passion that he had? And, basically, she had all the talents he had except for one problem, and that was she was born with two X chromosomes instead of an X and a Y. So because of that, she's going to picture that she would have gone crazy because she would have been repressed. She would not have been allowed the same benefits and the same possibilities of having her plays performed on stage and having her poems published that her brother William Shakespeare would have had. Now, again, this is a hypothetical situation. Shakespeare did not have a sister named Judith, and as far as we know, none of his sisters were actually, talented, but they may have been. But Woolf is going to say, what would have happened to a talented, smart, strong woman during the time of Shakespeare? And it's going to have a tragic end. So that's this week's readings. Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. She's speaking out for women. Her premise is women need an income and a room of their own so they can write, and they need a voice. They need to be able to speak out. They can't be silenced, and they can't be objects that are possessed by their fathers and their husbands. So I think you're going to enjoy this reading. The only project you're going to have is going to be on the discussion boards, but we're going to do something called a manic discussion. So I need you to answer those 5 questions before Wednesday if you want to get full credit. Some of you still aren't signing in until Sunday and doing all your work on Sunday, and that's not going to get it done this week. All right, you got to get answer those 5 questions by Wednesday, and then for the rest of the week you'll respond to 2 people who either say something you like or who have responded to you. So with that in mind, this week is Virginia Woolf. I think you're going to enjoy it, especially the ladies, but certainly the men. There's some value there for us too. And as always, if you have any questions, shoot me an email and I'll answer them as soon as I can.